Hey, Natalie. I'm so excited that you said yes and that you are my first guest for this episode. I'm excited to dive into all things homeschooling, mom life, everything, and really just for you to share with our audience why you decided to homeschool, tips on how to homeschool, what you even do, just so that we can get an idea into what your day looks like as a stay at home mom.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So I guess being a stay-at-home mom just kind of like it happened naturally. It wasn't something that I had planned on doing. I definitely was one that I was like, I am not going to stay home with my children. That's crazy. I'm going to go back to work. But once I had Olive, I just did not want to leave her. I just did not want to leave her. So I went from cocktails to substitute teacher to stay at home mom. And I think I became a full stay at home mom after having my second, Everett. And then I decided that I wanted to homeschool my kiddos. So I'm lucky. My husband and I struggled for a minute because he's a teacher. So, but he does pretty well for himself. Um, and we've had our house for a few years. So I don't know, it just kind of it made sense. It worked out pretty well for us that I got the opportunity to stay at home. Um, Now with the homeschooling, that is something that again kind of just like naturally happened. I was surrounded by the right people and we kind of had the same values and ideas and it worked out and I am very happy with how I'm homeschooling my children, which is not it's not your average like let me pick and buy this homeschooling um, system. It's free other than a few supplies that I have to buy, but it really focuses on the kids and playing and targeting their like natural abilities at their age. So our homeschooling is based a little bit off the Thomas Jefferson education. So if you guys ever get a chance to pick up that book, it's very insightful and it talks about the four phases of education, which my kids currently are on the first phase, which is core phase, 0 to 8 years old. And it really just focuses on work and play. So the kids just get to play all day long, and that's how they learn. So that's for right now. And then they move on to more um, difficult things. But yeah, so far that is how our homeschooling works and how I got here.
So, what I see is that everybody has their own opinion about homeschooling. Not everybody is pro homeschooling. And even though these are your kids and you get to parent them however you wish to, did you ever get a bit of resistance from the people around you when you told them that you wanted to homeschool?
Yes, I definitely got grief, and I still will get little like sasses from people. Um, but I would just talk with my husband about it all the time and really question him to see if I'm like, am I crazy? Am I doing the wrong thing? But because we've both been in the education system, we both worked in the schools. And like I said, I was a substitute teacher before becoming a stay at home mom, and I was a full time substitute teacher. So I took over a second grade class, no experience, and that's what the kids got for a year. And I actually come from having substitutes all throughout my elementary life. And I noticed not that substitutes are horrible, like they're great, some people do great. I tried my hardest, but I think I could have gotten a better education. I really do think so. And then also my mentor for this homeschooling, she will constantly like remind me of how we're always going to get backlash from everybody. And it's because it's such a norm to be in school. When in reality, if you look in the past, how only the rich actually got homeschooled. So really, am I doing something wrong or am I doing something that like the rich are doing and we don't know about? But also, I always tell people too, like, we're playing this by ear. Like, so every year we're going to see how the kids like it. Do they like it? Have they learned? Are we doing a good job? And if at any point we decide, you know what, maybe they need to go to school, then we have no problem like finding a good school and putting them in there. In our opinion, though, because we're in the school district, we know so much about the school district. We would just rather keep the kids at home. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a magnet school, if it's a charter school. At the end, what's your teacher? You know, what's your child's teacher? Do they have enough time for my kid? Are they using my kid to be another little teacher for another student? Not that that's wrong to help others, but where will my child grow? So I think just knowing the truth helps me realize I am doing the right thing. I am doing the right thing. Like, and again, it's such a norm for kids to go to school. And it's so frowned upon when you look back at like people who are homeschooled and like your first instinct is like, oh, they're weird. Yeah, well, you met weird kids at school too. So they're
That's
everywhere.
true. So it sounds like it took a minute for you to get confident in telling people that you had decided to homeschool your kids. But it's awesome that you have a very supportive husband and you guys have talked this through. You've done your research, you know the pros and the cons. You've actually been, working in the school system. So you've seen both the student side and the teacher side. So I honestly look at you and I have no idea how you do all of the homeschooling because I have tried to homeschool at home, and one of my biggest struggles has been consistency. And how do you find all of these activities or decide what you're going to be teaching your daughter, and your son every single day? Because I mean, I feel like all of us just go on Pinterest and are just scrolling, and we're scrolling for hours trying to find activities and resources, and then we have to go buy all of these supplies, and then it gets so overwhelming and then we just give up. So how do you do it? How do you find something for your kids to do every single day?
Before I met my mentor, I struggled with that a lot. And I did do a lot of activities through Pinterest and all that. Um, but when I met her, things just became a little bit more simplified because it's not about doing like those activities are fun and they're great for like once a week, and my kids love it. But really, what I try to focus on, okay, so let's start from the beginning. We start with our daily plan. We have a daily plan. So it's just a basic composition notebook. And I will write out now when Olive was little, which is she was in preschool, which is when I met my mentor. All she had to do was draw in her little journal, which is separate from the daily plan, her own little journal. She just drew a picture, and then I would ask her what she wrote or what she drew, and we would write it out. And I would just do it with a highlighter, like whether it was a rainbow, which she was on rainbow kick for a month, and she
So
would
she would draw
just
rainbows
write
for
up
days.
for days. She would just draw rainbows, and then I would just write it with a highlighter, and she would just trace it. I am big on the writing part. Um, on with her education, like I notice speaking to other moms that are in my group, theirs is different. Some like math, some focus more on reading, and I noticed that I focus more on the writing part with my kids. And so that's all we would do, and then we would play. We would play dolls, we would play Legos, we would play Play-Doh. That was my favorite thing to play with her. So we would do Play-Doh. And after that, like when she would play on her own. I would sometimes play with her, but for the most part, she played on her own. And that was her own independent time, which allowed me to do other things like wash the dishes, make breakfast, do other things like that. And she would just play until she was done playing. And then we would move on to like another little thing. Or I would just get started with my day with her and do other things. We're so focused on trying to emulate the school system that we're too hard on ourselves to do the same thing at home. We just can't do that because we're the mom. We have to make dinner, we have to make breakfast, we have to wipe boogers, we have to do all that. Trying to find a full 7 hours of like work, like we can't do that with the kids. And then they get tired of it too. Like they don't want to work all day long, you know? To be completely honest, we don't always get everything done in a day. And I've learned, which is still hard for me, I've learned that that's okay. And if we don't finish math on a day, then that's the first thing we work on the next day. My whole point is having her daily plan. So we write down what she has to do. It's kind of like us with our planners. We write out what we have to do for the day and she writes it all out. And as she like goes and she does each thing, whether it's writing, journal, math, reading, then we check it off. And then at the end of the day, we write out what our favorite part of our day was. And it changes for her, honestly. Like sometimes it's reading time with mom, sometimes it's math, sometimes it's writing, you know. Sometimes it's just playtime that she likes the most. And we talk about it. And then the next day, if we didn't get to math or piano, then we'll start with that. And then we don't worry about the rest. But her school day probably lasts until, and I say Olive because she's the one I'm really homeschooling right now. Everett is currently doing preschool with my mentor. I don't worry about him too much. We try to keep learning day until at least 2 o'clock when my husband gets home, and then we wrap things up because we get really distracted. But that's fine. And it's good. And that's why if we don't get it done, then we just push it to the next day. It's a scary thing because I'm like, did she learn? But then when I see her actually reading books, I'm like, oh, she's doing great.
That's so awesome. I love what you're talking about with the flexibility and being able to focus on what matters to you. For example, reading while other moms may be focusing on math, and also being able to nurture your daughter's interests too. I love that you don't pressure yourself to have a full school day, 7 hours of work, that you're not trying to emulate the school system, but you're really just making it work for you and your lifestyle, and for it to allow you to be able to do the other things that you need to get done at home, for your business and with your husband. And I also love just how honest you are and transparent about admitting that you don't always get to finish everything that you want to do in the day, but that you set your priorities, and that, if you didn't get to talk about math on Monday, it's the first thing that you do on Tuesday. And then when you least expect it, like you see your kids, and their growth, and that they're understanding and grasping everything that you're teaching, because you're not getting evaluations, but the work pays off when you see your child out in the corner and just reading on their own. I think that's amazing.
And really at this phase, it's more about like, it's building confidence in the child. I feel like in the school system, it's a lot of no's, it's a lot of good, it's a lot of bad, it's a lot of like validation for the kids. And if they get a bad one, like it's going to hurt them just like it hurts anybody else, So here it's like she can make a mistake, and it's so hard not to point it out, because you want your kid to do good, But at the same time, is it worth it? Like, I'm not saying like if she solves a math problem wrong, I'm going to be like, yeah, that's right. No, but I'm not going to mark it in front of her either. I can just look now like, okay, she has problems writing her numbers. What am I going to do the next day? I'll have her practice writing her numbers. She doesn't know, like she doesn't get it pointed out to herself like, oh, I messed up writing the number 3 and the number 5. She doesn't realize it. Like, why would I beat her up for it if she did so good and she solved a math problem, Like, okay, good. You knew the answer was 3. Now we just got to work on writing the number 3, But I correct her the next day. That way there's no like relation. She doesn't feel bad about it at all. And she's still confident enough to do those math problems again. You know what I mean? Without having to worry about like, oh my goodness, which side is the number 3 at?
Yeah.
So that's really that phase is building confidence.
Oh, I love that you talk about confidence, because I think it's so important for kids to really get their confidence when they're young. And unfortunately, what tends to happen in the classroom, I saw it as a student and also when I worked at the district myself, is that you do lose a little bit of confidence because kids are put into two groups, right? They're the higher kids, the smarter kids, and then they're like the lower struggling kids. And we have good teachers in the school system, but we also have teachers that are struggling and that need a little bit more guidance and a little bit more help and resources. Because as you said, when you were a substitute yourself, you were really just learning for a whole year along with the kids, and you were kind of getting your teaching legs. So when you were in the classroom, what did you see about these two groups, about the higher groups and the lower group of kids? Because it seems you really like to focus on praising your daughter for the things that she's doing right, and helping her get better at what she might be struggling with without making her feel bad for doing something wrong. I love that you're focusing on praising her and really just rewarding her for the things that she's doing right, and then you as the teacher being like, okay, I realize that she needs a little bit of more help, and I'm just going to work on that with her without, making that like red mark or making her feel bad for getting that wrong answer or writing that wrong number when she got the answer right, which is what we should be focusing on, is the right answer.
It was a lot of learning, honestly, and a lot of just like keeping up with whatever the administration had wanted us to do. Yes, it was a lot of, take the kids that understand the subject and pair them up with the other kids that don't really understand it. So there's like the higher kids and the lower kids, and which was great. Like that's, yeah, it makes sense to have the ones that know it explain it to the ones that don't, and it makes my job easier. The only thing is that's the only thing they would really say. They wouldn't say, oh, push the ones that like the smarter ones, or that's so mean to say, but the more advanced ones, like what can I do with them? And I always try to buy them chapter books. And the school I was at, they were really focused on reading and making sure everyone got to read, but they never gave me any kind of like, how do I get these kids to read? I don't know how to do it. Again, it was my first year. I go from cocktailing to being a full-time second grade teacher. It was a lot for me. And then I expected my entire class to know how to read. And I still had, I want to say, like at least 4 or 5 kids that were only reading like kindergarten level books, when I should have had them in chapter books, which again, it's kind of like, yes, they probably should be reading chapter books, but they're kids too. Like,
Yeah.
what, maybe that's not their strong point either, is reading. But because the school was so focused on reading, I think that was another thing that kind of brought the confidence level of some children down, and making sure you get quizzes done. And it was a lot of like more paperwork, like watch me grow and watch me get all these like stickers and books read and quizzed. And less like, oh, you read this book. What was it really about? What did you get from it? Like, what did you learn from it? Because that's what we do now as adults. Like, we're reading all these self-help books, and we're not just reading them to get like a point of like, I read a book this year. What did you really get out of it? Because I know I've read books. I've read an entire chapter and I'm like, what did I read? I have no idea. I have to read this chapter again. I have no idea what I just read. And I think that's what I really got from being in the education system, is like we read these books, so many, like we spent 2 hours in the morning reading books and taking quizzes, but what did these kids really get out of it? I don't think I remember hearing once one of the kids like quote a book that they read, because it was more, let's speed read this, get the quiz, get the star, move on, and it's just like constantly moving forward without really like reminiscing on what you learned. But that's one thing, is I want to praise my child for understanding something. Like she gets it, she likes it, and that's where we're at. When we read, we try to get a lesson, a moral out of it.
Oh, wow. It sounds like a lot of pressure for just second grade students to, have to read for 2 hours and do math and then science and all of these other subjects and be good at them all because they're being graded in everything that they do. Um, and as you were speaking, I kind of had this light bulb moment because isn't it funny how it translates into adulthood where we just want a gold star for the achievement, you know? Like we read books and we want to read 100 books, not so that we can get the knowledge, but so that at the end of the year we can take a picture of 100 books and, you know, showcase it on social media and say, I read 100 books and get all of these likes. So, the gold stars are in adulthood the likes on social media, which is, it's like I can see so many people in my life as those second grade students, you know, just fighting to get through the process so that they could get the gold star. It all just starts when we're little kids, you know? It's we're in this look at me culture. And now, as grown women, we have the pressure to be the best mom. We have to be good in all of the areas, right? The cooking, the cleaning, the marriage, the parenting, and the social life. So, with all of this pressure, how do you take care of yourself so that you can do everything that you have to do and have the energy and the brain power to take your kids to the activities that they have and then come home and homeschool? So, really, my question is what are you doing for you?
For me, I think I started focusing on myself. Like when COVID hit, I didn't realize how much I needed to focus on myself. But joining a book club has probably been my most like favorite thing to do because I talk a big game about reading, but I never did it. I never read. I wanted to read all those classic books. And that's why I'm so happy to have read this Thomas Jefferson education book because it talks about reading more classics to your children, which I absolutely love because I want to read all those classics. Like my daughter and I finished reading Wizard of Oz and Charlotte's Web, and I absolutely love those books. And I wish so much that I would have read those books as a child. Who knows where my creativity would have taken me. But I'm glad I'm reading them to her and I see like the impact and like just like the learning behind it all that she's gotten from it. Like I know we find ourselves talking about it all the time, her and I. And also it's just like such a great pastime to have with her. Okay, talking about me. I have learned that I really like I went through the self-help books, which is something I think I didn't want to do, but joining the book club made me do it and made me realize the areas that I needed to work on with myself, which helped so much my relationship with my children. I don't have a lot of patience. I really don't. Um, but I knew that I had to do something if I was going to be a stay-at-home mom full time and do a homeschooling with my kids because I don't want to yell at my kids. Like I don't. I know teachers do it. I've done it. You know, we've all done it, but I don't want to continuously do it. The first three books, I want to say, maybe even the first four books that we read in our book club, were it was just targeted towards me perfectly, and I loved it. And I reading that, talking to other moms, seeing that they also went through their struggles and knowing that they didn't have it all together has helped me mentally so much. Now, I say that as my me time because I am in my head all the time. So, getting the opportunity once a week, and it's changed now, but once a week, and talking to them and hearing their struggles and hearing their achievements and hearing like all their small wins has helped me realize, like, okay, I'm not the only one in this world going through this stuff. Like, this is great. And then it just like encouraged me to find books that I liked. I haven't picked out my own like fiction book in a while, but I want to pick up another one. The last one that I read was a western, and I absolutely loved it. And I would wake up early in the morning and I would get a couple pages read before the kids got down, and I was so happy. And I had like the rest of the time, and I was a happy mom. So getting to read a little bit every day was great. I also picked up a hobby of macrame, so that I usually have my me time at night with that. And I've noticed that if I at least work on something for myself, like macrame wise, like get my creativity out, I feel really good in the morning too. I wake up when my kids wake up, so it's really hard for me to wake up super early, I guess, unless I have a book that I want to read because I can't read it at night. I'm weird. So it's like I have a little bit of macrame to myself at night and a little bit of reading in the morning if I ever get a chance to. But those two things I think I have set aside the most of my me time, like getting to read a book. And just because I finally I'm in my world, like I
Mhm.
doesn't matter where I'm at. Like if I'm waiting for them at dance class and I'm getting to read, I'll be happy. And same with like macrame. I do it at nighttime just because I get zero interruptions. It's so peaceful to work without having to get up 10 times, and grab something. So those two things I think are my favorite. And yeah, that's how I try to plan out some time for myself.
I always talk about having a morning routine, getting up before your kids, really just spending time with yourself to set the tone for the day. But I think that the most important routine is the one that is going to work for you and with your lifestyle. You said you're reading during their dance class. I think that's great. You're finding these pockets of time when you can do the things that light you up and you're just getting them done and you're not worried about it being perfect. I think sometimes moms think that self-care means booking an hour at the spa, a massage or a facial, and leaving the kids with a sitter and having to pay her and organizing all of this so that they can get out of the house, and it gets expensive and it gets overwhelming. And it doesn't have to be. You don't have to book a spa. It can just be 10 minutes of reading, doing a little bit of your favorite hobby. For you, it's macrameing at the end of the night when your kids go to bed. I just love that you're doing it when you can and you're not overwhelming yourself into having to do it like everyone else.
And I've added in their daily plan, I started adding 20 minutes of free play for them. So because I wake up with them. So 20 minutes of free play, I drink my coffee peacefully. They play on their own. They don't ask me anything. And yeah, and I get to drink my coffee.
So I know we talked a little bit about your self-care, self-love, and how you found it when you joined your book club. And I'm sure you had a lot of light bulb moments and realize that maybe you should be doing things differently in your life. So did you know that there was something wrong, something you needed to change, or did you not realize it? You were completely just blinded. And then when book club kept advancing, you realized that you really needed to start taking care of yourself.
I think for some of the things, I had no idea. And then for others, I knew, but I wanted to resist. It's like that little bit of laziness that, like, I know I'm going to have to change something. I have to be proactive about something. When we read the book about finances, it was one of those where it's like I knew I should have been more involved and I just didn't want to be. Thankfully, my husband's like very sweet and has always made me a part of like any financial choices he makes. And he always tells me like this is how much we have and this is this, we owe this, and we don't really have debt, but he would always talk to me about it. And I never really wanted to listen. So I'd just be like, okay, I nod my head. Yes, that's fine. But then when we started reading that financial book, it was one of those that I didn't want to because I knew I had to be proactive. But I'm very glad I did. I feel like there was a sense of confidence that just overcame me afterwards. And I felt stronger knowing that. I feel like it kind of made our relationship stronger too. I think I saw happiness in my husband when he realized like, okay, she's interested. She's not going to just spend money. She wants to know, and it keeps me in a budget too. Not that my husband puts me in any budget, but just I'm aware he's the one that's physically waking up in the morning, going to work, putting in the hours. And me understanding the finances and understanding how much we make and what bills we have to pay and when helps alleviate some stress for him as well, knowing like she's aware that this bill's going to come out. So maybe we don't make super large purchases, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel good about it too. I feel good about spending because I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is how much we have. This is how much we could spend. And, I don't ever put anything on credit cards. I got in credit card debt when I was young, and it's just not as my daughter says, not my style. When we read The Monk, how to Think Like a Monk, that one was really insightful because it just helped me realize I need to, first of all, not like if anyone's talking bad, like just walk away from it, like the gossipness, like not having to repeat secrets or got not, I can keep a secret, guys. It's just I do like gossip. I think like a lot of women do. It's fun, but I learned not to. Um, it just brings that negative energy, like trying to stay away from negative energy, I suppose. And that one, I feel like I probably knew, but I was a little more surprised. The one that really got me though was the love languages for children. That one really, like, I think I cried with that one the most because I did notice that I was treating my daughter a little differently than I was treating my son. And I was a little more stern. I'm a little more stern with my daughter than I am with my son. So it was kind of a reality check like, hey, they both need the cuddles. They both need all this other stuff, and that each child is just different. Like each child is just going to be different and they need all of the love and support from us. Because it's true. Like I think about how I yell at my kids if I get mad at them. And then I think like, oh, if my husband yells at me, like I get so sad too. I love him so much. Why is he so mean? Why did he get mad at me for spilling milk? um, so things like that, like they were just great, but it helped me. It helped me at the time that I needed the most. I needed to know how to love my kids better, So reading that book was super insightful. I needed to learn how to be more humble towards people. So reading that monk book was great. I needed to know how to really manage my finances and plan out my day and just plan out everything. So again, reading those books were great. Now this last book that we're reading, it's good, but I also find myself thinking, I've learned these. I need to be putting, it's kind of like a reality check. Okay, you've read all these books. Are you putting them into practice? How are you putting them into practice? How have you seen a change in it? And so this last book, I feel like it's more like, oh, what have I done with everything that I've learned? Like how can I compare it?
I love hearing you say that you have been getting all of this insight from every single book that you've read. And really, you were only spending about an hour during the week, in book club. And that started giving you the confidence, in yourself, which then helped the relationship with your kids. And now allowing your husband to feel more supported, with the finances at home just from spending a little bit of time reading and spending some time during the week talking about what you learned with a group of women. I think that's proof that if we can just take care of ourselves, everyone around us benefits. Every book is a tool. So if something begins to stress you out, right, now you remember what you learned in Think Like a Monk. Or if you get overwhelmed with your kids, then you can remember what you learned when you read The Four Love Languages for Kids. And that's a lot of growth, Natalie, for just 1 to 2 hours of spending on yourself a week. You definitely seem more confident, more self aware. I mean, a year ago, you had a lot of self doubt, and now you're a mom entrepreneur. Like, how does that feel to look back? To look back at the person that you were a year and a half ago, and what have been the biggest changes that have helped you get from where you were to where you are now?
So wow, that's a nice question. I think it was definitely like reading the books, first of all, and then getting and reuniting with these girls for an hour and listening to them and listening that having that feeling of like, you're not the only one that goes through this. You're not the only mom that gets angry and flips out of her kids. You're not the only mom who doesn't really know all the finances. You're not the only mom who can't keep up with the day to day things, that you get burnt out cooking, that you get annoyed with your husband at times, that you just, that community has helped me out so much with my confidence. And then cutting out certain people in my life, not comparing myself to so many people, and constantly saying to myself, don't overthink this, let it go. So the thing that I've done, what I struggled with the most was obviously my confidence, especially after having kids. It's like your body changes, you change. So much about you changes. You go from being a single woman only caring for yourself to now you have to care for how many ever kids you have, including your husband, because you have to like include your husband in things. We have to do
Yeah.
date nights. Like we started doing date nights as well. And that's helped our relationship so much, being able to take just, and we only do it once a month. We only, because we have so many things going on in our life that like at least once a month. And then our babysitters are my parents or his parents. So we don't want to bother them too all the time. Listening to other moms, having people that like surrounding yourself with people that actually bring you light and positivity and encouragement has been so helpful. I know I was surrounded by a mom that was a little more toxic and
Mhm.
and nothing bad. Like I'm sure she was going through her things, realizing that like I don't think I need that mom in my life. I think when COVID hit and having to be isolated from people helped a lot, because I noticed my energy shifting from
Mhm.
being around certain people and feeling anxiety and feeling nervous all the time and thinking like, oh, where did I mess up? Having a conversation with a person, going back to my husband and saying like, wait, did I say this? Should I have not said that? What if she doesn't want to be my friend anymore? To now I'm like, well, I said it. There's nothing I can do now. She'll either
It's out
still be my
there.
friend or she won't. you know, we'll be friends tomorrow or we won't. We'll see. We'll see. And then yeah, just like honestly, not overthinking things. Like when I say to myself, like, I said it, it's been said, it's been done, and then move on from it, because I know I was definitely a mom who overthought every single conversation. And it was just because of the low confidence that I had in myself. And just like the friends that I surrounded myself with, which were probably friends who I wasn't sure were my friends. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
having you back in my life and talking to you and knowing like, okay, I can say anything to Sandra Pants and she'll be cool. Like she'll still be my friend tomorrow. Um, because you you have a positive aura. Like you have great energy, So um all of that has helped me out and helped me grow and helped me just like build more confidence. I mean, I still have self-doubt, of course, I think just like anyone else, especially with social media, but just surrounding myself with the right people has helped me out the most, and not overthinking things. Honestly, not overthinking things has, because if you did it, you did it. There's nothing you guys can do now. Hopefully no one judges you for whatever you do. And then just move on with your life, because we can't get stuck in the past and reliving the same moment. That's going to drive us crazy. So
Yeah.
things like that have helped me out.
Yeah, when COVID hit, I'm sure you had to sit with yourself, like all of us, and with your family, and really get to know yourself because we were in isolation. And so a lot of that outside noise was really shut off for all of us. And I see that you started to work on yourself, and you say a lot of those toxic people began to fall out naturally. And it's truly because I think that you began to set those boundaries. And then as people started to go out again after the pandemic, then you realize that you weren't the same person anymore. And I see, and even you realize that you were more confident, and that anxiety, that like need to control began to fall away, right? So you weren't going home and over analyzing every conversation that you had with somebody else when you were sitting there with your husband. And then you began to surround yourself with good, positive people that were helping you grow, and you began to ask your family for help so that you could go on date nights and spend time with your husband and get to focus on the things that you really value, which is, your family and the education of your kids. So who would have thought that Natalie from like a year ago would be in this space where she feels so confident, where she doesn't feel guilty or shame about what she said, and doesn't that just bring you so much peace?
Oh, so much peace. I mean, I think my husband's relieved from it too, of me not constantly questioning and asking him like, "Hey, just be quiet." Like, uh, but yeah, it's been so great, and it's nice because it seems like a lot of, maybe it's just, they always say that once you change, you attract different people. And I feel like the people that have been coming up to me lately and I've befriended have that same confidence, have that same mentality where it's like, well, it is what it is, like we said it, let's move on from it. We're all human. And yeah, that's the thing is I try my hardest, like I don't judge. I try not to judge anyone, and everyone's going through their things, and that is another thing that has helped with like the book club. I mention the book club a lot because it's that finding of a community is what's really
Mhm.
helped me, is finding other moms and listening to them and like truly listening to them, and hearing their battles and hearing like whatever else they're going through, because it makes me think like, okay, cool, I'm not alone. I mean, you always think you're alone because it's just you in your house.
Yeah.
So being able to talk to someone and other people and seeing their point of view, you relax
Mhm.
more. You're like, okay, everyone's going through things. Like everyone's got their stresses.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast, was to showcase the regular moms going through the same struggles and emotional roller coasters. I think that we need to hear more stories from moms doing regular life. And I think that we would hear more stories about moms if we could just not be so quick to mom shame or to mom guilt. And another thing that you said that stood out to me was how true it is that your vibe attracts your tribe. And you saw that in your own life. I think we always tend to go for the external changes, and we always think that that we need to see it externally first, not realizing that the growth that really needs to be done is internal first, and that's how things in your life begin to change. It starts with you, and then the right people and the right opportunities will start to come. So, thank you so much. I loved having you as my first guest on this podcast and talking about homeschooling and just, the mom struggles. And I just really appreciate you opening up, because I know that this is going to help other moms, just how it helped you to hear other moms talk about their own struggles and their journeys. Um, Hearing you talk about your newfound confidence, I know is going to empower a mama out there. And, just talking about how you don't have to homeschool for 7 hours a day, and you can just do a 30-minute session, and that's going to make a big impact in your child's education. That was an eye opener for me as well. So, thank you again, really, for sharing all of these things, for opening your heart. I'm so grateful you said yes. So, before we head out, do you have anything to say to moms?
Yes, I would say one thing for sure is like definitely focus on yourself. Um, I think before I started focusing on myself, I focused 100% on my child. And I think that's what got me in trouble is I was completely immersed in all of her and her activities. And I know I don't mention my son a lot, but it was because she was in a lot of things. Meeting people, just meeting those people, being around, like, just because it was everything about her. I think I fell and surrounded myself with some wrong people. I'm not saying that I put my daughter in some dangerous things, but I think I met moms who were also struggling and probably weren't in the right headspace, which made me in the wrong headspace as well, put me in that wrong headspace. So, but once I started paying attention to myself, I didn't have to live through my daughter's life. I didn't have to take over my daughter's life to live. I started living and finding my own passions, my own loves, and now my daughter wants to emulate me, which makes me so happy. She's so happy to learn macrame because her mommy's a macrame artist, and oh, it just brings
Oh.
me so much joy to know that she looks up to me as opposed to me looking up to her
Oh.
and wanting to do everything for her. So seriously taking time for yourself and finding out your passions and just even just a little bit of whatever you like, your kids will appreciate too.
Aw, I'm so glad that moms get to hear it from you now because I always say it, I'm always talking about how important it is to take care of yourself first and how it's going to benefit your entire family. So now moms get to hear somebody else say it as well. And what you said was so beautiful. So again, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed our time together.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.